So I am Jamie Edgerton. I'm the CEO of nvsted, and Chet here is the day-to-day manager, and we're a team of two. So we want to talk you through the genesis of nvsted, what it is, why it may be beneficial to you and other folks you know, and then answer any questions that you may have.
We're really excited.
There's another microphone.
So we are really excited to be here today and be able to present to all of you who have, if you aren't an entrepreneur yourself, then you have close ties to them. And we're essentially a program that is for the benefit of St. Louis businesses and that surrounding region. So what is nvsted? It's an equity crowdfunding platform. So what I mean by that is when the Jobs Act was passed in 2012, there was a lot of different initiatives put in place to be able to help small businesses to grow in the United States. And one of those was Title III, which is regulation crowdfunding. That was finally passed in May of 2016, and since then the industry has raised over $100 million for small businesses, mostly in the kind of like the tech space, but also food and beverage, and all sorts of industries have benefited from this area. And so we wanted to take advantage of this and be the first one that provided a hyper-local focus. So most other equity crowdfunding platforms are nationally based. So they will host a business from anywhere in the United States. And what we wanted to do was take that and funnel it into the St. Louis community, because we already have a lot of great startup support here in this city, and we wanted to be able to provide yet another program for small businesses to be able to receive the capital financing they need. Because when we go around and ask them what they need, it's usually more time to get the things done that they need to, and more money to pay for the things they need to. So we can help with one of those. And we are just excited. We just launched on April 18th. We launched with one company on there, Wellbeing Brewing, and they've raised over $16,000 already. So we're definitely on the move, trying to take that momentum and build it up to the next level, because investors can invest from anywhere in the United States, not just the St. Louis community.
So thanks, Chet. So a little background. The idea for nvsted started about 18 to 24 months ago when the law changed. And some of us sat down and thought, how can we benefit St. Louis community businesses on this law change? So in the genesis of the laws, as Chet mentioned, non-accredited investors can now participate in private raises. So that's the biggest, I think, benefit for this site. So prior to that, you had to be an accredited investor to be able to participate with those businesses, fledgling companies, and they wanted to allow other people to have fun and have the opportunity to make money and lose money, quite frankly, right? So with this site, anybody can go onto the site, any U.S. citizen, anywhere in the United States, and invest in companies or invest in your company. The idea that we had behind nvsted was to create a marketplace that had the tools, was compelling, that was coded, built, and owned here in St. Louis. So we looked at about 4 different companies to build this for us. We ended up choosing Happy Medium, which is located downtown on Locust. So all the coding was done here, which is fantastic. Nothing was offshored. All the photography was done here. Everything's created, and we actually own the code on the site. So when this is hugely successful for our community, we'll actually have the opportunity to license it out to other economic development organizations. So as Chet mentioned, the other sites which are for-profit, we are not. So when this does actually make money, and our forecasting shows we won't make money for quite a while, we will actually, those funds will go back into the community. So that's another benefit of why companies here in St. Louis should choose nvsted versus WeFund or Indiegogo or Kickstarter, those other ones. We don't take an equity stake in your business, so that's another benefit. And our fees there's no fees up front. We only receive fees if the raise is successful, and it's 5% of a successful campaign. So as companies look to nvsted to highlight their capital raise and highlight their business, the barrier to entry is very low. There's costs associated with setting up an escrow account with background checks. It's about $2,200, I think. None of that goes to us. So again, we don't receive any income, if you will, until the end of the campaign. And you can do a whole different slew of different types of raises on nvsted, from promissory notes to selling securities. So before we get into that, does anybody have any questions about the genesis of this, how the site works, and then we can talk about some of the ways to raise money.
So you're associated with the St. Louis Economic Development Partnership? How is that relationship?
So correct. So I wear two hats. I'm the Senior Vice President of Business Development and Finance for the partnership and the CEO of this company, which I joke that I'm the CEO of a company of two, and I didn't get a raise. I just have more work. So the Economic Partnership, we work with the county and the city of St. Louis, so we're the economic engine. So when you see that businesses are moving to St. Louis, or that they've actually stayed and grown, that's what our parent organization does. We set up two sub-companies to be able to house Invested. So we set up a Critical Technology Corporation and then a JV1 company that's basically the parent company of this. And the funds for Invested came from a promissory note from the Port Authority funds. So Port Authority funds are basically funds generated from the casinos that have to be used for economic development and the betterment of the community. So I presented to the Port Authority, we talked to the mayor, we talked to the county council to approve this. And that fund, that note was issued about 18 months ago. So that's how it's stacked together, if that answers your question.
Yeah, no. Yes.
From the entrepreneur's point of view, is there a difference if he works with a national company or the regional? I mean, what type of benefit would your company give as opposed to the national?
We could ask that question a lot. Why choose Invested versus one of the national companies? Really, if you want to be St. Louis centric and you want to be have more marketing, honestly, because think about it, we have one company on Invested now, so we can't legally promote the company and their raise. We promote the site. So if you were on WeFunder, you're going to be one of hundreds, right? Maybe thousands of businesses on those sites. To where if you're a St. Louis business and you're on Invested, you're getting the full exposure here locally. You're also getting national exposure. Some of the funds who have come in for Jeff Stevens' business have actually been outside of St. Louis.
Actually, a majority of the funds have been from outside of the St. Louis area. So we are getting exposure outside, but we have the added benefit of not getting crowded out with other businesses. So anybody who's getting driven to the site through site traffic, they're going to see the businesses on there. It's not going to be stacked behind pages and pages of businesses. Does that answer your question?
And the fee, to be honest with you, the fees as well. So, like I said, it's 5% of a successful campaign. The other sites are significantly higher than that. It's also those sites, I think almost 100% of the time, they'll take an equity position in your company. We don't. So for us, it really is a portal for you to build your page, promote your company, raise those funds. And again, low barrier of entry and low fees on the back end.
Thank you.
I have a whole slew of questions, but the first one is, what's the maximum someone could potentially hope to raise?
So it's $1,070,000 within 12 months, and the 70,000 is based on inflation. So you can do multiple raises, you can do one raise. I mean, our suggestion is to do multiples and not try to get $1 million. And then you can enter the second half.
Yeah, so that's a rolling 12-month period. So if you raise 500,000 and then you raise 500,000 6 months later, and then 6 months later you could do 500,000 again, because that first 500,000 it'll have been 12 months since then. And so you can continue to do multiple raises on regulation crowdfunding, and there's no limit to the number of raises you can do. It's just the total amount in a 12-month period. And then, did you have a second question?
I did. Would you actually be able to raise equity through this? I mean, because some people aren't going to invest unless they can get equity.
It's an equity deal.
Is there that possibility down the line that you can do?
I'm sorry, I still didn't really. So you said
Wait,
raising money
you
without
said
equity.
do promissory notes,
Right.
ventures, that sort of stuff, preferred notes. Could you actually, could someone, put up equity in their company? Because a lot of people won't invest unless they have, unless they get equity.
Yeah, definitely.
Okay.
Yeah, so we offer all types of securities. So there's the debt securities, which is like a promissory note, hybrid securities like a convertible note or a safe, and then a equity play, so it'd be, yeah.
And warrants as well, obviously.
So it would be typically the way it's set up in the offering statement. Warrants would run through one of the different types of securities on there as its vehicle.
Yeah, it's an add-on. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, that was the big thing about Title III crowdfunding change. So yeah, I actually thought most companies would want to sell equity, but a lot of them want to do promissory notes because they don't want to sell a piece of their business. But Jeff Stevens of Wellbeing Growing is actually selling some of the piece of business.
Is there a minimum amount that someone can invest in the company?
So that someone can invest in?
Like a minimum amount for an investment?
Yeah, so anybody can invest, so we start our minimum investment defaulted to $100. So anybody with $100 can invest. So a company who's coming onto the site can set their own minimum though. So if they want to limit the total number of investors, then let's say they set their minimum for $1,000. And that way, if they have 100 investors, they get their 100,000, and then they only have 100 investors instead of crowding it out. Yeah, so Jeff Stevens has $500 as his minimum for Wellbeing Brewing, and he did that purposefully to limit the total number of shareholders for his company, or potential shareholders, I should say, because it's a convertible note. But that is intentional, and we allow the flexibility on our site for companies to be able to set that up how they like. So there's a minimum and a maximum that you can set. Right. Okay, and so for the minimum for actual company raising on our site, we set a soft minimum at 50,000. So there's no regulated minimum for a company to be able to come on and do regulation crowdfunding. But we do ours at 50,000 because those upfront costs, we want to make sure that that's not going to be a huge chunk of a raise. We don't want somebody to have a goal of 10,000 and have to spend $2,200 up front, and it would just be a lot of work for not very much reward. And so the whole intention behind this is to benefit the businesses in the community. And last but not least, for investors, when we said anybody can invest, that is anybody can invest a minimum of $2,200 in a 12-month period. So no matter what your income is, no matter what your net worth is, you can invest $2,200 through regulation crowdfunding in a 12-month period. Now it can go higher than that, up to $107,000, depending on that particular person's annual income and their net worth. So that's all based as a percentage. So up to 50,000, or sorry, up to 100,000 is 5%, and then above 100,000 for annual income, it's 10%, is what their limits are. Any other questions for right now? We'll give you a chance in a second. Okay. So our next portion here is who can raise funds. Like we said, we're focusing on St. Louis-based businesses. So do we curate based on what type of business you have? Mostly no. So there are some industries we won't host on our site, and that's because they're vice industries. So we won't do like marijuana companies or adult entertainment or gambling, those types of companies. And there are regulations saying that financial institutions can't raise through regulation crowdfunding. But aside from that, any industry can raise on our site. So if this is something that could benefit your company, then we want to have a conversation with you. And we're not going to turn you away just because you're in an industry that hasn't broken out yet. And so we definitely want to entertain any type of industry that's in the St. Louis that'll help grow our community. As for,
I should mention real quickly too, the questions that we get are, does it have to be a startup? No. So it can be an existing business that actually has revenue. And an example of that would be an existing business that may have a relationship with the bank that has a line of credit. Their line of credit maxed out and they want to buy a new piece of equipment, they want to open a new facility, whatever it may be. This can actually be used as part of that capital stack to help that business continue. So it can be a functioning business, and it can also be a startup. Back to the gentleman's question in the back about equity. So if you are a wonderful idea and you don't have a functioning business, you're probably going to have to sell a piece of your business to raise funds versus a promissory note, because you're going to have to convince people to invest in your business, right? And if you don't have funds coming in, because your expectation is you will get paid if you want a promissory note. So that's where probably offering equity in your business is going to make the most sense.
Yeah, one more question. So what kind of, if any, sort of due diligence can the potential investor group ask for, and what does the sort of the group that the company, is there any vetting, if you will, of the information that the company puts online so that the investor feels that they can rely on at least what's there?
So when we bring a company on through our onboarding process, we are getting to know their company. And when they are putting through their financial documents, their Form C, which is part of the regulation crowdfunding offer, then we're looking over that to make sure it makes sense and that they're not making any outlandish claims, they're not making their valuation 20 times what it should be, those types of things. So we're making sure things make sense. And so when the company actually goes to open their escrow account, when they're getting ready to start their raise, our escrow agent actually runs a bad actor check. So that's making sure that none of the officers of the company or the company itself has been involved with any money laundering or embezzlement or just any type of fraudulent activity that an investor should know about. And so we do that on that side. And then for potential investors, we also run an anti-money laundering check. And so for each person who's investing, we do that to protect the business. Now, as for due diligence that an investor can do, all of those documents that a company has pertaining to the raise is public. So their Form C, which is the offering statement, it gives information about the company, its operating history, the details of the security they're offering. That's all posted on our company page, and it's on the SEC website. And so investors can take their time and review that information, as well as any financial statements that the company has uploaded as well, which right now the requirement is for 2 years of reviewed financial statements for a company, or as much as they can provide if they're a startup. Is that a good answer? Perfect. So for our next bit, we have actually some screenshots of the actual website, which I see a couple of you have laptops and smartphones and tablets, so if you want, you can go straight to the site. It's investedwithus.com, invested spelled like it is up on the board. And then what we have on there now is one company, Wellbeing Brewing, and really the way the site is set up is with 3 main components. There's the invest component for potential investors, there's the raise funds for potential companies who are wanting to raise funds, and then we have a resources section which is robust and provides information to investors, companies, and general information about the industry and the types of securities that are being offered on the site. Actually, I did want to run one. So with the company page, we don't build that for the company, and we don't dictate to them how it should be built. We actually have a really, Happy Medium did a great job setting up this site, making it so where a company can come on and they can build their company page however they want. So on the right-hand side, it shows Wellbeing Brewing's page. And if you go on the website and look at their page, that was built by Wellbeing Brewing Company. So they put all their marketing in there, they put in all of the copy, imagery, videos, everything in there was put in, and they have the ability to market their raise how they see fit.
So when I started talking earlier, and said I wanted to make the barrier of entry low and also compelling, you have every tool you could possibly need on the site to make your business page compelling. So you can embed videos, animation, really anything you need to tell that compelling story to your potential investors. And if you go to the page, Wellbeing has an awesome commercial that's hilarious. So I suggest checking it out. It's just really funny. And I should mention also that, truly the power of the crowd. When we launched this 2.5 weeks ago, which is amazing, it's only been 2.5 weeks, there's 4 companies building, I think 5 total, right? Building pages right now that we had no interaction with at all. So it was awesome for us that in 3 days after launching the site, we look at it, there's companies actually building pages, and that's really, really cool, I think.
And just to kind of piggyback on that, there is no cost to building a page on the site. So if you as an entrepreneur are considering this as an option, but you're not quite ready yet, you can go ahead and start to build your company page and start to build out your dream a little bit of what you would want your raise to look like, what you want your marketing to look like. And that can be useful in a couple of different ways, helping you organize your thoughts about your business, what your capital needs are, at the same time as actually getting ready to do something like this and kind of take that next serious step for your business.
And at this stage, Chet and I are available, Happy Medium is available to answer questions, to give you thoughts and ideas of how to build a page. We just can't do it for you. So that's another benefit of being an early adopter of this. And to go back to your question about why this versus the national, that's why. We're not a call center. You call my cell phone, I'm going to answer. typically after work hours too. So that's another benefit of doing this and being in St. Louis.
And we can come and meet face to face instead of having you go to San Francisco.
Which is not bad.
No, it's not. Right now we have opportunity for more questions, or we can continue to push on. We just have one or two more slides.
Sure.
How much you are proactive to expose the companies to outside the world? I mean, is it a
For marketing?
Yeah. No.
Do you mean to repeat the question?
Yes, we won't try to-
Another mic for
Yeah.
the question.
Is the process that you actually do is a passive one? You're waiting for investor to come to your side, or do you have any proactive procedure steps that you expose it to the world?
So I see that as two questions.
Yeah.
So is it passive? So are you to wait for investors to come to your page? Or is it more active? So I'm going to answer that in two ways. If you're the business owner, it needs to be very active. Some of the research that we've done, that we did before launching this, was that 90+% of companies that are successful with a raise have actually raised the funds before they go on a site like this, because you're telling everybody about your company, right? You want everybody to know about your company, you want to secure funds. This basically legitimizes that raise. So it takes that bootstrapping and calling mom and dad and cousins and friends and your coworker and asking them for funds now goes in through this site into an escrow account. So very active from a business. And I think with that, you would get some passive activity as well, right? The crowd. And then for us, we're doing a very active marketing campaign since we've been launched again 2.5 weeks. We just engaged a PR firm that's going to be doing some national advertising, a lot of local advertising. We do a lot of events like this. So I think it's active on both fronts. We just can't, again, promote the individual raise. We can say, check out Wellbeing Brewing. We can talk about Invested. And so you'll see that ramping up.
You had a line at the kind of the very beginning, me again.
Yeah.
And you said eventually you're going to start, once you actually make some money on this, you're going to start actually plowing the money back into the fund. Could you explain how that's going to work if you're not taking any money on the back end of any of these deals?
So what I said was any revenue, any money that comes in through this site is going to have to go back into the community. It goes back, since we're a nonprofit and economic development agency, if you will. Those funds, we're not going to get commission. It'd be nice if we got a raise, but I doubt that. We're paid by county taxpayer dollars. So thank you if you live in the county, you're actually paying us to do this. Since we get 5% on the back end of any successful raise, and we're not taking an equity position, and we're not getting paid up front, it's going to take a lot of companies, and it's going to take a lot of successful raises for this to start getting out of the red. When that happens, it will be awesome. And when that does happen, then maybe it can go into hiring more folks to help Chetna. Maybe it goes into larger servers. So that's how those funds will be spent. It's not going to go into anybody's pocket.
Can you said there was a number of companies that are currently building pages. Can you talk a little bit more about the onboarding process, or how you go from, is that's something that's, that they're doing privately behind, and then it becomes public once they've met with you and the Form C's been filed and that sort of thing, or?
Well, it actually kind of took us by surprise a little bit when we saw so many companies right off the bat starting to build pages, because up to that point, we had been, kind of feet on the pavement, talking to businesses, seeing if they would be interested. It was a lot of face-to-face meetings because the site wasn't ready yet. And when we're building it, like on our, kind of like our behind-the-scenes server, and when we finally launched the site, we see people coming on and building company pages. So to answer your question, for our onboarding process, it can go multiple different avenues. It's always going to end up with us doing face-to-face meetings if you're going to be doing a raise, but it can start off by right here, me talking to one of you right now, or it could start off by you visiting the site, building a page. I'll send an email and say, hey, the page is starting to come along, that's great. If you want to meet in person, let's set that up, and then we'll go from there. And there's no pushing on our end to get you to start your raise right away. It's whatever works best for your business. We want it, because that's the only way it's going to be successful in the long run. Sure, we could push you and get the raise on the site right away, but that may not be the best decision for your business. And so we want that to be part of the conversation as well. And we'll work with you to do that. We are an economic development corporation. So
So can the company page, is the company page public and something that you can send people to even before you've started an official raise? Or has it only become visible once the raise is?
Right, so the page is private,
Okay,
only to the person who's building
okay,
it.
got it.
And it stays private until we, as invested, push it live as a raise. So you would have to go through all the due diligence, filing the documents, setting up the escrow account, and then the page is
And
live.
when do you have to pay the escrow? What time, when is actually the point that we must pay the escrow?
Right, yeah, so those upfront costs.
Before, once we create the pages, or?
Oh, so you can do it at any point. This is when you can pay it. So you can build your page completely first
With no commitment?
with no commitment. Or you can just jump right in and start to, so the first fee that you would pay is actually to iDisclose, which is the company who files your Form C to the SEC. And so they, it's actually, we like to explain it as like a TurboTax for Form C filings, because they ask questions, and if you, based on your answers to those questions, they'll ask for more detail or ask you to specify a certain area. And so it's very intuitive, and they actually provide example text for you to just copy and paste and input your own business information. It's very easy, and so that's the first one that's paid, and that's $1,500 when you're ready to file your Form C. And so you can build your company page before that at no cost, but that's the first thing you pay. And then once your Form C is complete and filed, then that's when we would file for your escrow account, which is $500.
I know there's a question in the back, real quick. I want to keep reiterating that none of those fees come to us.
Right.
And that was really important when we were building this. Again, we wanted to make sure everybody knows that we don't get paid commission. So if we get 20 businesses on the site, we get no financial benefit from that. So it really is important to understand you can build that page, you can spend as much time as you want, you can turn it on whenever you want. And then also, what I should have mentioned at the beginning of the presentation, this is actually approved by FINRA. So we went through government approval to be able to launch this site, and we're, as far as I know, the only economic development organization and the only, basically, municipality, if you will, that has this right now in the entire United States. So that's really cool in itself. And then Chet and I, both had to go through background checks, all that good stuff as well. The due diligence that the SEC and FINRA did also.
So are you guys just targeting startups and companies in St. Louis or even across in Metro East?
So we're focusing on businesses right now in St. Louis City, County, and adjacent counties is how I like to describe it. So we can accept businesses founded anywhere. So Metro East, Shore, Delaware, Washington State. So we can do that as long as they have a significant presence in St. Louis. So if the point of them raising funds is to hire employees, make an office in St. Louis, then we can host them on the site. Again, the intent isn't only to help St. Louis businesses, the intent is to drive economic development in St. Louis. And so we want the results of the funds raised on the site to help generate job growth, business growth in our region.
I think the idea is very interesting to sort of bring the model to a local level. I'm just wondering from your own research before you launched, are you able to quantify that level of, or that premium of trust that exists locally as opposed to nationally? Like, what's the difference between how much people are willing to invest locally? I mean, regular investors, regular people that aren't even accredited locally, as opposed to things that are national or, I don't know, ICOs or whatever else people are putting their money into nowadays.
So you asked if we could quantify that. We can't necessarily quantify that.
Not quantify, but I mean just in terms of like what your overall feeling.
Right, what our overall feeling is, I mean, we did do research. We actually had a group at Washington University do research on the industry and how something like this would be accepted in at a community level. And what the findings were that the civic mindedness is a pretty big part of even regulation crowdfunding. You can see that in Kickstarter. I mean, people are giving money for really not much benefit. I mean, they might get the first version of the product, they might get a t-shirt. I mean, so it's more of a civic-minded type of helping that business out. And that carries over into this, even though there is an investment component to our type of crowdfunding, there is still a large civic component. So when you bring in a community level, by nature, people care about the community they live in. And when they see that a business is on there that's just down the street and they just tried out their product because they saw it at Whole Foods or something, then they're going to say, hey, like, I know that. And they'll have a lot more trust in it that way, rather than it being a company they've never heard of, in a town they've never heard of, across the country.
I'll add to that as well. So, correct, we did the research through a bunch of very smart young folks at WashU, and what we found was, to Ched's point, they were investing more, or the research, they'd invest more to feel good about what they're doing in the community, especially that younger generation. Wasn't necessarily looking for a return right now until they get my age, has kids, you know, they need to pay for college. So it really was a focus on what would be the draw to invest in a company or somebody that you know that lives on your street, that you work with. We saw that draw was pretty great versus going to a weed funder that you don't know the company at all. Then your expectations are really just for a return or to get that bumper sticker or a new product where you think it's fun and cool. So we did base a lot of our decisions on that research.
I know this is early for you guys, but have there been any other cities that have contacted you and asked about if they're exploring doing a similar effort, or do you know of any other?
And not that I know of. So I don't think.
I know it's only been 2.5 weeks, so
There may have been people who, you know, there may be some buzz going around, but nobody has formally reached out to us and asked if they could take our product and use it in their own city. But we have had talks within our own community within St. Louis about, hey, how can we expand this? Maybe we can focus it on a specific community in St. Louis, like Tower Grove or Midtown, or like, how can we do that? And so we're already seeing that talk in our own micro community, and so it makes sense that if it applies here, then it would expand out to other cities, especially if we're successful.
So with Missouri Venture Forum, we and Chad have already begun a conversation about, we have our fast pitch entrepreneurs that go through our program, and we are starting to talk to them about how to incorporate nvsted and what we do into that program. So that's another way that, and again, all of our businesses are, fast pitch businesses are St. Louis centric companies. We have several of them in the audience today, so it's very cool. So that's another way that, you know, collaboration is happening. I'm sure it'll happen all through the ecosystem. So.
Yeah, and just to kind of piggyback on that, so Missouri Venture Forum, ITIN, all the other different programs of assistance or advice that are in the St. Louis community, we want to partner with them. So we're not trying to step on anybody's toes, because this is all, we see it as being synergistic, where a company who's going through the Fast Pitch program they're looking for people to invest in their business. That's why they're developing a pitch. And so maybe a good option for them would be crowdfunding, and by developing their pitch, they are getting the way that they want to explain it to potential investors on a crowdfunding site. And we want to be able to partner with as many different programs in the St. Louis community as we can to be able to propagate that message out.
I wanted to add something to the thinking about working with Cultivation Capital and some of the organizations. The questions that Jeff and I, because he's been working with me on this for the whole time. He's our compliance officer, and he has another day job as well. The question was about the number of investors and K1s and all that good stuff, right? So if you're starting a business, clearly you probably want to have large capital injection. Perhaps you want to have an exit strategy in 5 years. Private equity comes in at some point. So I'll give Jeff credit, because he's the one that did the research and came up with this. So if I misspeak, come up here and grab a mic. One thing that he came up with is that you can actually have a lead investor. You can't pull all the investors together at this point. I mean, the law is very new. Maybe we can down the road. But you can designate a lead investor, which is someone who has credibility to be a lead investor. So, it may be someone, she may be a CPA, he may be an attorney. Well, with that lead investor, then, all those shareholders will follow that lead investor. So you can limit the number of investors, much like Chad mentioned about Jeff Stevens and his company Wellbeing. You can also designate that lead investor so that, say, 5 or 6 years, you have Brian Matthews looking at you, or Cliff Holcamp, and they want to buy your company, which would be great. You didn't have that lead investor to take the rest of the investors with them.
All right. Well, we will end with the question that we always try to remember to ask, and that is, what can the community do for you? I think you've touched on a number of things, but anything else you want to add as far as what this group can do?
Well,
Help
the
you?
key to success for any crowdfunding platform is to have a crowd. And we,
Yes.
yeah, so
By
really,
definition, it needs a crowd, otherwise it's just funding.
you don't have to tell people to go on and invest, but if you want to say, hey, there's this new program in St. Louis, they're taking this national concept and focusing it on our community, go check out the site. We would greatly appreciate that. We want as many people to see our site as possible, so that when we have new businesses on there, they're getting as many sets of eyes on their business as they can.
Can I ask one more quick question? I'm so sorry.
I don't know, should we just take a vote? Can Ned ask one more quick question before people get a chance to get more
I'm
confident?
bigger than all of you.
No more than
Quick question. So when somebody's raising money, they cannot mention to the room normally, because they don't know if there's accredited investors in the room or not, how much they're raising. Is that an issue when you're doing crowdfunding? I can go in front of a room like this and I can say, I'm raising $500,000 on a crowdfunding site because I don't care if they're accredited, right?
As long as you file your Form C with
No,
the
assuming
SEC.
I'm on the
Yeah.
thing and all that
Oh,
stuff.
yeah.
but
So if
it's
you're on
not
the
an-
site-
If I'm doing a Series A, I can't come up and do that because I don't know if everybody in the room's accredited. So, but I can do that in crowdfunding. That's cool. That's a big deal.
Yeah, that's the beauty of this, is because it's open to accredited and non-accredited investors. It makes no distinction between the two. So
Right.
any group of people you're talking to, you can relay the message that you're raising funds on the site. You can't say that it's the best offer ever, but you can say that you're raising funds on Invested.
And then can we run two in parallel, two campaigns? Can we run?
Oh, so one company conducting two raises at the same time on
No,
the same
no, for
site?
example, we have a campaign with your site and then to go to a venture, to a VC or
Angel,
angels or
different,
other.
pure
Yeah.
equity raise.
Yeah, so if you can do multiple types of raises. So you can do a regulation crowdfunding raise, and then you can do a regulation D raise.
Right.
It's a different D, it's a Form D, then, right? If you're, right, it's a different form, but,
Yeah, exactly. So there are multiple avenues to raise money, and doing regulation crowdfunding
No,
doesn't
my
preclude
question,
you.
can we do it in parallel at the same time?
Yes.
yeah, you can.
But you better follow
You
both
just have to
sets of
follow
rules.
Okay, all right, well, thank you so much. You guys are gonna stick around for a little bit if people have other questions, you can come on up. But thanks so much.
Tell everybody just to tweet this out.
Yeah, absolutely. So, yeah, I tweeted from the 1 Million Cups thing. We'll tweet out the video as soon as Mary gets back from Chicago and edits the crazy beginning. And then you can retweet that. But definitely, I didn't talk about our Twitter handle at the beginning. That's usually something I say. But anyway, get busy on social media. Give 1MC and Invested some love. And get up, get some more coffee, introduce yourself to somebody you don't already know, and come back next week. And if you feel like presenting, let me know, because we just had a presenter shift to another week. See you next week. It'll be a surprise.